My name is Chris Hesse. I'm 41 years old. Today is April 2nd, 2016, and we are in StoryCorps, Atlanta. And today I'll be interviewing my Aunt Tammy.
My name is Tammy Pickering. I am 57 years old. Today is April 2nd, 2016. I'm in StoryCorps, Atlanta, and I'm here with my nephew, Chris Hesse.
All right. So, December 20th, 2014 was a day that changed my life and many people's lives in so many ways. It was the day that my mom passed away. And just 6 days later, my wife's mom also died. And it was a crazy time in our life. And I feel like so many things came from this. It was a bad thing, but it made me kind of reflect and think about my own life, things I've missed, things I wanted to know, and things that I didn't really know. And I feel like I missed an opportunity, with my mom and my wife's mom dying. Family history that I don't know. And so I want to use this opportunity to talk to you about, what life was like growing up here in South Dakota, with my mom and grandpa and grandma and all that. So I really am excited to hear some of these stories. Some maybe I know and some maybe I don't. So I think, first of all, I'd like to know, what was it like growing up in the Midwest as a child here in South Dakota?
Well, Huron was very small, as you know. It was about probably 13,000 people maximum, and we didn't actually live in town. We lived outside of Huron on a farm, which it was 2.5 miles north of the West Park truck stop. That's how you told people where we lived. It was an older farmhouse, 2-story. The kids had our bedrooms upstairs, and one bathroom, no shower, which today's day, is quite unusual. But we learned to take turns and really share, I think, because of growing up that way. Dad was a gentleman farmer. So by that, I mean he worked during the day, and before he went to work and after he went to work, he would come home and feed cows or mow or do the things that needed to be done on the farm. So it was, in my perspective, I think it was a wonderful way to grow up because you learned to be self-sufficient. You did chores, you had tasks to do growing up on a farm, and yet you were close enough to a small town to be able to go in and see a movie or go to Newberry's, that type of thing. So it was a great way to grow up. Mulberry trees outside and a tree strip in the back to play in and a chicken coop to go out and a barn and haystacks and so many things that you could do as a child before really TV, because growing up in rural South Dakota, we finally got a TV, but we got one station, and that was fuzzy. So we didn't spend a lot of time in front of a TV.
Right, right. What was a typical day like for you growing up on the farm?
I would say we weren't so much like a farm family you think of, with milking cows or anything like that, because we didn't do that. So we didn't have to do a lot of farm-type chores, which was nice for us. But like I mentioned, we shared a bathroom, so everybody had to kind of stagger getting up. I remember your mom wore contacts when she was older, so she would take a bowl of water up to her bedroom and, put on her makeup and do her contacts up in her bedroom so the rest of us could use the bathroom. Sandy and I were close in age, so 13 months apart. We tended to act like twins and do everything together. So, we'd tear outside and play something until Mom would make us, weed the garden. We always had huge gardens, and they changed locations a couple times. And I think that was probably the way she got us out of her hair, too, was to send us out for hours in the garden. But it's just mainly I remember playing a lot, just having a really good childhood, being able to explore. We had old junky cars and kind of like trash out in the tree stirrup further out in the middle of the farm.
I remember those.
Yeah.
We used to venture out there and go through all sorts of glove compartments and find treasures from when you were a kid. Those were treasures. Now, of course, they're just junk, but
Yeah.
it was great.
It was fun, and you didn't have to worry about, the kids' safety or anything. You just go out there and play for hours at a time. And yeah, there was a lot of freedom to explore and do things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, really pretty easy. Mom stayed home when I was younger. As we got older, she started to work, but she always had dinner on the table, and Dad would come home from work, and usually he would have to feed the cows. Usually we ended up, when we had chickens, and that's when we were a lot younger, we had to gather the eggs. And every once in a while we had to clean out the chicken coop, which was disgusting. But yeah, I mean, it was a good childhood.
Yeah. So I know that you guys had tractors and trucks and stuff like that. Talk to me a little bit about driving a tractor, and like how young were you when you first had to drive a tractor? And
Yeah.
is that pretty typical?
I think being all girls in the family, Dad probably maybe made us go to work on the tractor earlier than if he'd had, some older boys or something. He pretty much said, just get out there and do it. Mm-hmm. So,
he didn't tell you, like, all right, here, first and stick in the clutch. And,
Well, first the little Ford tractor, which I know you remember, it was an icon.
Yeah.
It was hard to actually sell that little Ford tractor because it had been in our family all our life. That's where we pretty much first learned to drive anything. And, it probably equates to kids driving like an ATV now. They get on it and they go. It was pretty simple to drive. And so we started doing that. I have to say, maybe 10 at the oldest, maybe even a little bit younger.
Wow.
As soon as you were big enough to get on and push the pedals. But it was fun to drive. And as we got older, we had to help with like raking. So as Dad would cut a field of alfalfa, then we would have to get on the little Ford and pull a big rake behind it. And so in the summertime, we definitely probably had more chores, helping with stuff like that. And I think your mom even might have mowed, which that's a big responsibility. But because she was older, she could drive the John Deere tractor and do a little bit more than the rest of us. So she would also, because she was older though, she had to start hauling bales much younger than we did.
No.
So even,
there was the rectangular ones,
right?
The smaller, okay,
right, the big hay bales. So when we were young, Dad always did those type of bales, and he always did the ditches. So ditches are like free hay. And that's, cattle feed. So he would always do the ditches, and I would get to drive the little Ford with the flatbed behind it, but Deb had to be on the flatbed arranging the bales.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, and Sandy got her turn too, driving, but I kind of lucked out being the second oldest because I got to drive more than do the hard labor.
Yeah. So you had a lot of chores in the summertime, and obviously you had some in the winter, but during school, now I know that my mom would always talk about she went to school in a one-room schoolhouse. Tell me a little bit about that, and did you also attend that small school?
We did. So it was about a mile and a half just south of the house. It was a one-room school. It had the old in-floor heat register. We had outhouses, one for the boys and one for the girls.
Wow.
So you can imagine in January going to the bathroom outside was an adventure. Lots of snow. It seemed like we always had a lot of snow in South Dakota. It was, again, I think a great experience. So in a one-room schoolhouse, you have the teacher and then you have a recitation bench. And then everybody's in the room and you're hearing everyone else's schoolwork. And so you would be studying and the sixth graders would go up, or, from the time you were at kindergarten, you would hear all the way through eighth grade. And your mom went all the way through eighth grade in the country school. We called it, it was named Hoskins School, and it's actually on the state fairgrounds now in Huron.
I've seen it.
Yeah. They moved
really
it there.
Small.
It is small. It didn't seem that small at the time. It did not have running water. So one of the ways we actually made money was to haul water to school every day. And we had two big plastic containers that we would fill up in the morning, and then we'd take those to school, and they would be, we'd fill a big crock to wash our hands and that. So that was something that you kind of enjoyed doing because you got paid for it. and a way to make
So
money.
did you walk to school uphill both ways, that kind of thing, or?
We were usually lucky enough to get a ride, yeah.
Okay.
Although we did ride our bikes when it was nice, because it was only 1.5 miles on gravel roads. So you could do that occasionally. But usually we had a ride to school, or the neighbors would bring us home after school when Mom started working. But, it's interesting because, like, even spelling contests, we would all prep for spelling contests. We had massive blackboards at the front of the school. And again, you would sit there and listen to the older kids. And so I always attributed a lot of, I think, my intelligence to being in a country school where I really had
That's
an
interesting
intense
because
education.
I feel like people would probably say the opposite, like, wow, you were so limited and you just had this.
Right. Yeah.
But you think it's the opposite.
I feel like it is. Yeah. I feel like I really had an intense focus from my teacher. She only had 12 kids in the whole school.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like you hear like frontier times, stories about that. So it's really interesting. It blows my mind that you guys both really successful women, very intelligent, came from these humble upbringings, and that always blows my mind. So I'm glad you told me that. So tell me a little bit about your memories of Grandpa. So your father died, I believe you said when you were 29, and I was in 7th grade, so I was really young. But I do have memories of Grandpa. But what were some of your best memories of your father?
It's interesting. When Dad passed, all 4 of us girls felt like we were his favorite. So, my dad made everybody feel special.
Yeah.
He was a very generous man, a very kind man. He, even in the people that he worked with, he would do, like I said, maybe mow somebody's field or something, or rent land to someone. He was always so kind, and he would never have a crossword. He would get angry, but he would never be mean-spirited.
Okay.
And I loved riding with him in his truck. And it's probably, maybe you and some of the other kids remember Grandpa's truck.
The green truck, yeah.
The green truck. He had built a metal stand in the middle where he would put, his coffee or whatever he had with him. And he always had cookies in his truck. And it was so great because you could go with Dad, and then he would let you have, I think they were like the molasses with the frosting on them. And so it was always fun to take a ride with Dad somewhere.
Nice.
Yeah. And he worked in town as well, for the Bureau of Reclamation. And he worked in a big metal Quonset hut. And when we started going to school in town, when they closed the country school, we started going to town. We would occasionally ride the bus down to near where he worked, and then we would ride home with him at 5:00. I remember we would always go in, and they had vending machines. And remember, we were, growing up on a farm, we didn't have McDonald's and things like that back in that day. So we loved going in and getting like the salted peanuts out of the vending machine. It was such a treat. So he always, just kind of made us feel special. And, he was a hard worker. Got up, like I said, early in the morning, did chores after work. He didn't spend a lot of downtime until he got older, and, just wasn't able to do as much. But yeah, I think your mom got a lot of her kind spirit from Dad.
Well, yeah, well, it's funny. That's how you started off talking about him, because I feel like my mom was the same way. Like, we always joke about, like, oh, I'm her favorite, or I was her favorite, or,
right.
And we had no favorites. There were definitely, like, she treated us all equally, and we loved each and every one of us the same. So it's neat to hear you say that.
Yeah.
Now, I've always been curious, and I don't know if you have any memories, or he spoke about it a lot. He was in World War II. Did he ever talk about that? Did he have any stories or anything from the war?
Right. Most of the things that I have from the war are the mementos that I got when your mom passed away, that she passed on to me, because Dad did not like to talk about the war.
Okay.
He didn't talk much about the travel. He didn't talk about the war, any places he'd been or seen. I always got the impression that he just didn't want to think about it. He went, when he was very young, I've heard that he actually lied about his age to get in early.
Oh, wow.
I never verified it, but that was one of the stories I'd heard. And I think there was probably a lot of impressions that he just didn't want to share. And throughout his life, we didn't travel much. We did end up going to California because Lisa, the youngest, is deaf. And we went out there to the School for the Deaf to, just find out more about what her life would be like and education and stuff. But Dad just didn't want to get in a car and go anywhere. And I think it stemmed from being in the war. He just wanted to, be safe at home.
Do you remember where he served, where he went overseas?
He was in France.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that for sure. I don't think he was at Normandy. But yeah, it's one of those things I regret not maybe digging a little bit more from him. But at the same time, I had to respect his wish not to talk about it.
Right. So Grandma, I'm going to fast forward and then backtrack a little bit, but, Grandma Anderson, his wife, she has Alzheimer's now, and so she's not able to tell us any of this stuff. But do you think that, if we had the opportunity, she would have openly, you think they discussed these things and how it shaped him or impacted him? And think she would have been able to tell us a bit, or?
I don't know that he shared much with her either, because through the years, like I said, it was almost like a taboo subject.
Okay.
More so, we would hear a little bit more about like the coupons, that type of thing from Mom through her parents. So, the coupons you had during the wars to get food,
okay.
That type of thing. But yeah, she never talked about it much either. So I don't know if he didn't share that with her. Maybe he just said, I don't want to talk about it, because it really wasn't in all of our family. When you think back, nobody ever really talked about it very much, and protective mechanism or not.
Right. And didn't he got a Purple Heart? Is that right?
Yes, that's the one that I have at home. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk to me about your mom. What are your best memories or earliest memories of her, and
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about that.
I will, but when I'm done, I want you to talk about your earliest memories of both.
Okay.
Of both of them.
Sure.
Okay. So Mom was, she was always busy. She stayed at home when we were young. And then as we got older, she went back to school and became an LPN.
Marilyn Anderson. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Marilyn Schultz Anderson. So she came from a German background. But she was a hard worker. And, it's funny. I just think about her. My probably most vivid memory is of her doing the ironing in her bra and shorts. I think because in that day and age, you always ironed everything. Dish towels, sheets, handkerchiefs, everything in that day they ironed. And we didn't have air conditioning, and it was, summer in South Dakota and hot, and a fan would be in the window. So that was her way of doing it without getting too hot and sweaty. But I just remember the ironing board and poor Mom working to iron everything. It's funny when you're growing up, you take your mom for granted. All the things they do for you that you don't think about. But, that I say, she made us go out and pull weeds. Well, she was in the house cleaning the entire house, cooking, ironing and washing and doing all that. And it was an older farmhouse, so, it was a little bit run down. But, she was she was an intelligent woman going back to school and getting
When did she go back to school? Like where everybody was born? Or?
No, she went back to school when, your mom was at Augustana College in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Okay.
Grandma was in Sioux Falls going to LPN school. Lisa, because she was born deaf, went to school in Sioux Falls at the School for the Deaf. So we had half of our family in Sioux Falls. And then Dad was home with me and Sandy, and we were in, was it high school? It was either middle school or high school. And so Dad actually would have to get us up every morning. He always made us the best breakfast. So
What would he make?
Oh my gosh. Every day there was something different. Like one day it might be oatmeal, the next day eggs and bacon, the next day waffles, pancakes.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, he always made sure had full stomachs. But she went back to school. She took her boards it was a year long, and then she moved back home and she took her boards.
So did you say what she was studying?
LPN, licensed practical nurse.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Which you could do in a year, a full year. So you go a full
And
year.
She stayed there.
She stayed in an apartment and stayed there. We would visit her once in a while, but she was pretty focused and she was studying all the time and she was really worried about passing. I think she always underestimated her intelligence because she did really well in school. And then when she took the boards, you had to wait in those days because it wasn't instantaneous.
Right.
And she thought she flunked because she kept not getting her license and everybody else was saying they had gotten theirs. And she was pretty devastated. And then all of a sudden it arrived, and the mailman, there was a rural post office, they had dropped it in the car and it had footprints on it, and they'd been driving around with it in the car.
Oh my gosh.
And she had passed, of course, with flying colors, but she was so emotional over it.
Wow.
But yeah, so she was a very intelligent woman, and driven. She really supported the family a lot. My dad had a bout with alcoholism, and I think it made her even stronger because she had to support the family and make sure that things kept moving forward. Mm-hmm. And I remember her saving 50-cent, or was it 50-cent pieces, I think, or silver dollars, one of the two. But she saved enough to buy a winter coat in Sioux Falls. So she was thrifty as well.
Wow. Now, did Grandpa not work when he was?
No, he continued to work. I don't remember if he ended up taking off some time, but I think it was just, with 4 kids, it was just a challenge. Yeah. And then having Lisa go to school in Sioux Falls was also kind of a burden because they had to drive down usually every other weekend and get her. And it was a 2.5-hour drive from here into Sioux Falls. So we would drive down and pick her up and then bring her home so she could have the weekend with the family.
Right.
And then drive back. So that, I think, played a part in it too. Mm-hmm. But it was always exciting to go to Sioux Falls and get Lisa.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we always felt bad for her.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. She's busy. Yeah. So now you talked about your dad being this, very similar to how I would describe my mom, caring and, loving everybody. How would you describe your mom? My mom was more...
I
almost feel like she was so busy that she had to all right, we've got to do this, this, and this, and
right.
Let's just get it done.
More the bossy type, get it done type, yeah. And I probably take more after Mom because more type A, I always like to call it to make it seem better. But it's have a schedule, get things done, keep it organized. That's probably more her. She seemed more harsh to me, I think, when I was younger. And now that I'm older, I understand, all the things that she was doing. She hosted almost all of our holidays. Thinking back, we would always have, Thanksgiving, Christmas. She would do all the cooking and baking. And as Deb and I got older, we started baking and stuff too, so we could help with that. But she did a lot of hosting and keeping the family together. Keeping, Dad's side of the family, Maxine and Dale and Gordon and Gladys. They would come for holidays, and Grandma and Grandpa. And when Bev and Mel lived in Huron, they would come with Natalie and Greg. So, she was a good person, I think, at keeping the core family together.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I always remember. The holidays were always so fun as a small child because everybody was there, and it was just such a big event and so much fun. Now, you mentioned that she cooked a lot and baked a lot. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that, like my mom did that obviously a lot, and you continue to do that. Are there any other traditions related to holidays or things that you know remember from your childhood that either are continuing or you would like to see them continued?
Right. Well, of course, back in that day, we were all pretty close together. So we were in South Dakota, and eventually your family moved to Nebraska. But, you know, it was just nice for everybody to get together as we grew older. When we were kids, you know, we were in that old 2-story house, and the tree was downstairs, and Mom would hide the packages under the bed or in her closet, and we would always sneak down and open them in advance and then put them back. I remember that pretty clearly. But your mom was more the responsible one. She might have even tattled on us once or twice, but she, no, holidays I think probably are the ones I remember when you were little and your brothers and sisters were little, because we would have the big Christmas holidays downstairs in the newer farmhouse that
Right.
Mom and Dad built. It was the first year that I went away to college, so I think they finished it in probably 76 or 77, and they moved into that house. And so they made the basement very nice for family events. You'll probably remember playing pool down there.
Absolutely. That was like the highlight.
And you kids would all, you know, just run around and have a great time, and very cozy and warm. There was a bedroom down there, and then Dad had his shop on the other side of the
Yeah.
wall.
And that really long deep freeze. That was like the longest one I've ever seen.
Well, that's because he always would butcher a cow every year and put all the meat in the freezer, and that's how you fed the family, right? All year was by doing that. So for the carnivores in the family, it worked out well.
Well, I think we were probably all carnivores at that
At that point.
Yeah,
Might be why you're vegetarian now.
could be.
But yeah, no, it just was so warm, and then Mel and Bev would usually bring oyster stew.
So Bev is Grandma's sister, so Aunt Bev.
Right.
And then Mel.
Mel was her husband.
Yeah.
And they moved back. They lived in South Dakota, in Huron, in town, which I always thought was really cool when I was a kid, because they lived in town. And, you know, as a kid growing up in the country, you thought it was so great to be in town and be able to ride your bike to your friend's house. But they lived there, and then they moved to Palmdale, California when we were pretty young. And we did get to go visit them a couple times.
Okay, so that's something that I guess maybe I kind of knew, but didn't really know the whole story on. So they moved away for a while.
Right.
And how long were they gone?
They were gone all the way through Natalie and Greg growing up. They didn't move back till, I don't know what year, but, you know, everybody was grown up and out of the house when they moved back.
Yeah, because, I mean, she was like another grandma to me. Aunt Bev was.
Right.
So, like, I just considered her another grandma.
Yeah, yeah.
So I never knew that she was away, or, you know, she was always there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so they were always involved before they moved away, and then when they came back, you know, they restarted some of those traditions. But, you know, Mom moved into town after Dad passed away, so then that, you know, we kind of lost some of that too.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I was going to ask this a little bit later, but you, or I guess Grandma still owns some land where the farm was. They sold the farmhouse. You know, there was a
Right.
big auction, which was very emotional for the family. But you still own some land. The family does. What is there any plans? Are there any plans for that? I know that I think you and my mom had talked about doing something with it.
So the big story has always been that there might be a gravel pit on the north section. And so we've talked about having that investigated to see if there's gravel out there. I'm trying to find some connections in South Dakota that can maybe help me investigate that. And talk to people, though, who say, you know, gravel's only worth it if they're building like a freeway or something around there that they need the gravel for. So it's proximity, I think. But yeah, we do have about 300 acres, and we rent it out, and that, you know, helps to pay for some of Mom's expenses. And the people who run it have been family friends for years. So there's a great deal of trust there.
Yeah.
Knowing the people will, take care of and respect the property, and because they knew and loved, dad and mom as well. And
Yeah.
I usually get a short note from them when they make the payments twice a year, and they just ask how everybody's doing. And they were shocked when your mom passed. Actually, it was very sad news for them as well
Yeah.
because they knew her. So yeah, we'll probably just keep it until mom passes, and then decide what to do.
Okay.
Yeah, it's generating some income, and property has value. So, and if she ever needs it, then we have it there for her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we've talked a little bit about Grandpa and Grandma, but growing up, I always felt really close to Grandma's parents, Grandpa and Grandma Schultz, which I called them Grandma and Grandpa Sugar because Grandma used to call me Sugar all the time. So then I kind of gave her the name Grandma Sugar, and it stuck. So, do you want to share any memories or great stories from the Grandpa and Grandma Sugar?
Right. Well, I never knew that's why you called her Sugar. So that's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, they actually lived in town too for a while. You probably don't remember that. You probably remember the farm.
Just the farm. Yeah.
Right. But again, it was kind of fun to go visit them in town. And then they moved out to the farm, and that was really cool because they had the old farmhouse where you could go do the exploring, like we talked about in the woods. There was stuff you could find in there, old antiques and things that we would get to explore. But it was. I wasn't as close to Grandma and Grandpa as you were. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to hear your stories. They were always there. We could ride our bikes there as well because they were only a couple miles away, and visit them. And probably again took them for granted because they were always there. And,
Right.
And you knew they were there. And Mogan David is probably the biggest thing I remember. They always had Mogan David on holidays.
So is that the story behind MD/the doctor? Why my mom used to drink that?
I think that's where it did come from, was the
That's hilarious.
Grandpa having his Mogan David, and then your mom started having that little bit of Mogan David, and then I told her it was the doctor because that way we could rationalize it.
That is so funny.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So, tell me a little bit of, you were the first grandchild. That seems to be very special. Is there anything specific that, you recall?
Well, I loved going out to the farm and just having free reign of everything. And, kind of like you were talking about in your childhood, like just being able to go out and explore. And gosh, Grandpa probably was so mad. We would climb all over the bales of hay and build forts and move things. And it was just so much fun. It was like you could let your imagination go crazy. And, we had like elaborate forts set up in the tree lines. And like I said, we'd go out to all those cars that were just, I guess Grandpa let people throw their old cars there, and we just go and smash windows and do all sorts of stuff we probably shouldn't have, but it was just so much fun as a kid. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed going out there, and it was fun. The original house that you guys grew up in, they eventually tore that down, but before they did, we would sneak into it, climb through a window, and we would dare each other to go down in the cellar. And yeah, that was a no-no. Probably shouldn't have done that. But it was really neat. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Grandpa died when I was in 7th grade, and now I do remember him a lot. And I was telling you that he, smells are very evocative for me. So like, if I smell something, I can go back to a time and a place. And I was saying that just the other day, I smelled something that was like, oh my gosh, that I haven't smelled that in 20, 30 years, whatever. So I definitely still remember him. He was just a really, gentle man, like you said, and always so kind and, willing to take us out, whether it's in the truck or just be there.
Yeah.
And it's been great getting to know Grandma through the years, and it's been really unfortunate and sad with Alzheimer's, and to see her kind of lose her memory and capabilities, and it's been it's been a hard thing. I know it was really hard on my mom, but it's one of those things, I don't know, I guess that's life, and that's something I remember. My great-great-grandma Smith, she had Alzheimer's, and just remembering what it was like as a small child, and now seeing this as an adult and seeing Grandma go through that, and, thinking to the future and wondering and worrying, and it's, I don't know. I guess that's life.
It is. What about Grandma Sugar, though? What about anything?
Grandma Sugar? The one story I always tell is I was a bit cheeky when I was a kid, still am. And I caught a garter snake, and we were going to the cattle sales. They would always take me to cattle sales, and
Right.
it was like the greatest thing when you were a kid to hear these people, whatever they're saying. I can't do it, but I had this snake that I wanted to bring with me, and she's like, "No, put it away." And I was like, "Okay." And so I had the kangaroo pockets in there, and so I was holding it in my pockets.
Oh.
And she's like, "What do you have in your pocket?" So I pulled out one hand and had the snake in the other, and I put that on there. She caught me. So, but yeah, there are so many memories. I mean, that was just one of them. But
Right. That's great. I hadn't heard that one before.
oh yeah,
I'm surprised she even tolerated the snake in your pocket. I would have.
she put
screamed.
up with me. I was the first grandchild.
That's right.
Yeah. So, what do you think would be some memories that Grandma and Grandpa and my mom, or maybe stories that they would want people to know either about them or about Huron or about growing up in the Midwest? Maybe just one or two things that, we can't let people forget about this.
Well, I think about family values. It's all about family. Your mom carried on, I think, that tradition of my mom and always having the family around. The most important thing was to have your family nearby, to involve them in as many things as you could. Your mom focused on always having all you kids around. She was always open to having us come and stay with her. Your mom never said no. It was, I'm going to pop in for a visit, and she was welcoming. I think that was handed down through the generations. And even the year before she died, she hosted the family reunion.
Oh, yeah.
That summer. So, I mean, what a great opportunity for our family to come together and to renew bonds that a lot of us had moved apart over the years. Family values.
Yeah.
You have to treasure those moments.
I would agree. Definitely coming from her, family first, and family matters the most.
Yeah.
So that's great. Let's see. What else do we have here? Oh, so growing up in the Midwest, everybody attributes different values to different parts of the United States or different parts of the world or whatever. Would you say that growing up in the Midwest instilled anything in you unique, or how did that make you the person that you are now?
Right. Well, I think, a work ethic, a very strong work ethic, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, as they say, and honesty, the family values again. I know a lot of people think, if you're from the East Coast, you're this type of person, or West Coast, you're this type of person. But I think if you're from the Midwest, you're well-mannered, you're polite, you're kind to others. I notice it when I travel to the Midwest now. I live in Arizona, so I see a big difference. But I love it when I'm on a plane in the Midwest, because the gentlemen help you with your bag, or they're kind and polite. And, it really... You notice it when you move away.
Yeah, it's funny because, so Sheila, my wife, being from the East Coast, coming to the Midwest for the first time, 15 years ago or whatever, she's like, wow, everybody's so nice. And everybody says hi and looks you in the eyes and stuff. So
Right. Yeah.
it's funny that you say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see here. What else do I have? So Dad and Mom, do you have any memories with they met, I think you said, when you were 11. Are there any fun memories that you want to share about when they first started dating? And I understand that, like, Grandpa really put him to work on the farm, doing all this and that.
Right. So he was the boy that Dad never had. So when he started getting serious about your mom, he had to kind of earn his way. So he would have to help haul the bales or rake or, do chores around the farm. We, as younger girls, loved to peek out the window when they would come home and, watch them to see if they would kiss goodnight and spy on them a lot. So I'm sure that we drove your mom and dad nuts. But he did. He really worked hard for Dad. There was a snowstorm once, and he loved your mom so much. He walked out in the snowstorm to the farm so that he could see her. I love that story. I just think it shows the devotion.
From town out to the farm.
From town out to the farm, yeah. So
that's not a short
no.
jump. And South Dakota blizzards are pretty harsh.
They are, yeah. So, but yeah, they were. It was cute. Your mom was a beautiful young lady. She was always very reserved. Almost formal. If you notice some of her pictures from high school, her graduation picture, she looks very formal. Mm-hmm. So she was always a very nice, respectful woman. And then your dad was kind of, a little more crazy. So I think they fit well together. They broke up once or twice. And,
really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I remember that, but they always got back together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know the reasons why? That would be interesting.
No,
Can you say the reasons?
Yeah. But they had a lot of fun. Your dad took her on a date shooting, and he tells the story, about how she actually knew how to shoot a gun because she had learned from my dad. So he was pretty impressed.
I guess that's one of the things growing up on a farm in the Midwest you would know how to do.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So she was the kind of girl that he liked, and she enjoyed doing the things with him, and she would accompany him when he'd go fishing or, whatever it was he wanted to do. She was all in for it. So over the years, I think that helped nurture them.
That's definitely one thing that I can appreciate about their relationship. They that respect for each other and the interests and the patience, and we would sometimes say maybe putting up with my dad, but she was really good at that.
Yeah, she was.
Okay, cool. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for telling me some of these stories. Some of them I've heard, and some of them I've heard a little bit more about now. So I really appreciate it, and maybe we can do this again and document some of these memories. And now that we've started the conversation and we started to think about some of these things, we can relive them, and as we get together for holidays and continue these traditions that we talked about this morning.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for poking my memory and prodding it and letting me share these thoughts.
Yeah, thank you.